Welcome and thank you for joining us today on A Lawyer and a Mediator Walk into a Bar. We'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land from which we broadcast today and acknowledge their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hi, everybody. This is Paula. This show is not about legal advice. It's really just about our experiences going through the process in the family law courts, what can work, what doesn't work, what's for you to consider to try. And it's just about the process, giving you some familiarity with it, and hope that gives you a little bit of a help.
You're listening to a Mel and Kim Productions podcast. What happens when a lawyer and a family mediator step into a bar? Join us to find out. Dianne and Paula have real conversations about the family law process in Australia. Whether you're a part of the family law system or about to engage in the process, find out what the realities versus perceptions are. Dianne and Paula don't hold back on their individual perspectives and experiences.
Everyone, nice to be back and welcome to this episode of A Lawyer and a Mediator Walk into a Bar. I'm Dianne Loveday from Bayside Mediation.
And I'm Paula Applehans from Betts Law Company.
And today we're going to tackle how are children included in the family law process.
And how those have changed.
Yeah,
just since May 6th as well.
So I'm thinking that for this week we'll just touch on what happens in mediation, and then next week we'll cover off what happens in the legal space.
Right. Just familiarity as to what your children may be going through.
Yeah, because it is quite starkly different how it works. But there is this requirement and expectation that the voice of the child will be included in any major decisions. So how that happens and
what it looks like. What does that look like? I think exactly. As a parent, I'd be like,
exactly. I know.
What do you mean?
That's why I'm suggesting we need to dedicate a bit of time to this to help people understand the two processes and how it can benefit the child and families if done well.
If done well and appropriate, I think it's almost a godsend.
Yeah. Are you familiar with child inclusive process or child inclusive mediation?
That's where you come in.
I know, but isn't it interesting that, I've been doing this, I've been an FDR mediator now for more than 15 years, and I have been including child inclusive mediation in my practice since day dot.
So for 15 years?
Yeah.
Because I know it's a new concept, I think, to many lawyers.
Yes.
And again, at one point, the court was like, keep the children out of it. Once you've filed in court, there's whole provisions that have nasty penalties, if the children are included in the process. But what you're talking about is something distinct, different. And
proudly it was actually created here in Melbourne by two psychologists who worked then for the Family Mediation Centre. And one was Jen McIntosh, that a lot of people might know, and the other was Kathy Hogan, who a lot of people probably don't know. My experience with child inclusive process comes through Kathy. I was taught how to do it in my course and thought it was a really worthwhile tool to have in the toolkit.
Now, is that because you also have a psychology background that appealed to you, or it's one of those things where can just anybody do it?
Yeah. So as an FDR, we don't actually do it.
Right.
All right. The process is, and I'll go over the process just briefly so you get an idea. So the process is parents initiate mediation, FDR mediation, with an FDR practitioner, and in the pre-mediation or intake conversations, you determine whether or not child inclusive process would be a good idea. So you're determining what the ages of the children are, what the issues are, what the likelihood of there being an outcome to the process, because one of the big problems in mediation is you cannot take on board what the child is thinking or saying if you haven't actually heard from the child.
I would think not.
But you can imagine, I often get comments like, but she told me this. Or this child told me that. Well, I'm really great that you're having conversations with your children, but maybe they're not appropriate conversations. But okay, but I can't take that on board because I haven't actually heard from the child. And so this is a process where you get to actually hear from the child. So if both parents agree, then the children are actually interviewed by their own neutral third party. So
okay. So there's a whole nother pathway in that process.
Exactly. So in our practice, that neutral third party is somebody with either a psychology or a counselling background and who has experience working with children.
There you go. Ding, 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 ding,
ding, ding, ding. Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the red flags. You've got to be really, really careful when you're going down this pathway, because when you ask about it being regulated, it's not.
In Melbourne, in Victoria,
in the country,
something's not regulated.
Yeah, something that deals with children and requires that person then to become the voice of the child in a legally facilitated process is not regulated. Does my head in, but anyway.
Okay. See, that's news to me.
Yeah.
I would think there'd be some sort of parameters.
No.
Okay, there we go.
Yep. There is a certificate course that some people do. I know Jen McIntosh actually does a training course that is over several weeks, but I know there is a certificate course that some people do and then go buy a box of bear cards and set themselves up as child inclusive practitioners. So you've got to be really careful with who it is your children are actually interacting with.
And that's why you ask questions. That's why you listen to us today to talk about how do I ask questions? How do I vet these people? You know, what does this even look like? And is this something appropriate for my child?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And ultimately it is the parent's decision.
Right.
I love it when I get to hear from the kids because it's the only opportunity I have to hear from the children.
What age has been the youngest?
The youngest was 3.
Okay.
And you've got to bear in mind that it's not a conversation like you would if you're an adult having a conversation with a therapist
or whatever.
3-year-old. No, not with a 3-year-old. So I know we have 4 practitioners we use at the moment, and 2 of the clinics, one has a therapy cat and the other has a therapy dog. So you know, and this
can my dog.
Yeah. Which can be really useful for kids to help them relax into the process.
Yeah.
But when you're dealing with young children, really young children, it's play therapy effectively. Okay. And what the therapist will be doing is, yes, engaging the child in a bit of conversation, and they do it without the parents there.
Yep.
All right. So there's no
influencing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, because when my kids were little, all it took was a look.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
There's always, you know, they cue for those looks.
And the tone.
Well, even if you're not talking, no. Watch Mama's face.
Yeah.
Mama will not say a word, but you watch her face.
Yeah.
So I mean, you get them comfortable, you separate.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then using play. The therapist will engage the child in activities that help us understand how they feel about their world. So we're never going to ask a child an adult question or engage them in an adult conversation. And an adult question would be, who do you want to live with?
Yeah, no.
And you just do not. And even in the most subtle ways, and this goes for parents as well, you shouldn't ask a child an adult question. It's just really unfair. They love both parents. Even if in your view, the other parent isn't a particularly good parent, that doesn't mean your child doesn't love them and want to spend some time with them. Right. So how do we help children articulate where they're comfortable? All right. So an example that I like to use is you might ask a child to draw a picture of what their home looks like.
Oh, did you? And I'm going to laugh because that is exactly what happened in a kindergarten story.
Right.
And it looked like the kid drew the parents, the sibling, and it looked like they drew a noose around each of the necks. Now, what it was actually when the parents were called in, because of course there was some concerns, it was when the family went snorkeling. And the rope was the snorkel. Yes, as much as a 5-year-old could do.
Yeah, but exactly. I mean, and this is why you need somebody who knows what they're about.
I love that story.
Yeah. Well, some of the examples I've heard over the years is like there'd be a picture of 2 houses, which is ideally what you're looking for. Ultimately is a home with mummy and a home with daddy.
Yeah.
And that the child sees that they have 2 homes. Sometimes you'll see a single home with a whole bunch of people in it, including the non-residential parent. I've even had boarders included in these pictures sometimes. Yeah.
But that's their experience.
That's their experience.
That's what they know.
Sometimes you'll have a single house and then there'll be this lone person way off in the distance standing by themselves.
But isn't that always interesting, the perceptions from the children as to...
That's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
How do they see their world and their focus? So once we can determine then who are significant in the lives of the kids, so who do they see as significant? And obviously we always include mum and dad in this conversation, but it's nice to know if grandparents and step-siblings and aunts and uncles, or who is it that's really important to the
child. There's a family unit,
Yeah. So once you see this picture, and I must just share this one because there was a time when there was this young lad who was asked in this process to draw a picture of his family, and in the very corner of this large piece of paper, he wrote, "I'm fine," in black texter. 3 weeks later, that little boy drank dishwashing liquid. And so you can also pick up if your children are struggling in this process. We can also give you some heads up if the children need some extra help.
Right. And that's important.
It is important.
Because and I know from my side of the story that parents are usually at such odds that understanding how this is affecting the child, sometimes, and not intentionally, that's the real thing. Not intentionally, but it gets glossed over.
Yes. Yeah.
Or
it
just
I
gets,
know better because I'm the
parent. I'm the,
better.
yeah.
Of course I know what's best for my child.
Yeah, but if you're emotionally invested in something that is adversarial, then it's really difficult. Sometimes I'm looking, I don't care how good you are.
Yeah.
Things are going to get muddled.
And
they get mucky.
Insight is useful.
Yeah.
So then what we ask kids to do, once we work out all these important people, is ask them, are you familiar with bear cards? They're gorgeous. Bear cards.
Nope.
Bear cards is
I feel like I should know some of this. But again, once it gets to my level, I can't have the kids in the office. I don't get to see the kids.
I don't either.
Yeah.
So this, I know, and I suppose it's my background. I'm curious as to why I'm curious with this process. So bear cards is a set of oversized playing cards, really large playing cards that have cartoon bears in all different stances and facial expressions. So there's cards with grumpy faces and faces.
Sounds like I should have that deck.
And give it to clients when
just when I'm on the Zoom, here's my face.
But there's
point to the smiley face or point to the face that best describes your mood. I think that's what they use in healthcare.
Oh, they do. Yeah. Well, there's over 80 of these cards.
Okay, that's a lot.
So it can be quite nuanced for children because it's amazing what they pick up.
Has to be, doesn't it?
It's amazing what they pick up. And so then they're asked to pick up, to choose. So show me 2 or 3 cards that would represent mummy or daddy or whatever.
Yeah.
And so what you're looking for is a nice healthy range. So yes, you can be angry and yes, you can be sad from time to time, but then there should also be nurturing or silly or funny or happy or whatever. So you're looking for a nice bit of a range that helps us understand that this is a healthy relationship. Nobody's expecting a parent to be perfect and always, cheery and never losing your cool. You're going through one of the most stressful experiences you will ever go through. Yeah. So we understand that. But what we're trying to get to is an understanding of where the primary connection still is, especially for very young children. And it's really important at this point to point out the primary connection doesn't mean primary parent.
Or primary carer even.
No, primary carer, no. Yeah. It simply is where the child's primary connection is. And if we think in terms of survival, it's a survival technique. So as very small babies, they can't see, they can't speak, they can't communicate in any other way other than crying.
Vulnerable, helpless.
What they can do is smell and touch. So very early on, they work out through smell and touch where they're safe, where they're going to be fed, who's going to make them feel better, who's going to respond. Exactly. Who's going to manage all those day-to-day needs that they have, their survival needs.
Right.
So once they've got that person in their sight, they don't want to let them go. So you disappear for any great length of time, whoever has got you is going to know about it. There'll be distress.
Yeah.
And we don't want that level of distress.
Right.
As children get older, their comprehension of that process, the survival shifts, and they understand that there's more than one person who can feed them and comfort them and do all the things that they need.
Whoever's going to answer their cue is all they care about. So,
and you can have a very close relationship with a child. Yet in the middle of the night, if they hurt themselves, they will call out for the other parent.
Yeah.
That's your primary parent. Not because they don't love the other parent.
No.
Not because the other parent is vitally important in their life. It's just that's where they get their comfort from.
And I guess really, I mean, how as a parent do you say that's not a judgment? No. And that's not something you go to the court with and say, oh, see, this is better because this, and there's, I'm better than, they're worse than.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not a judgment.
No.
I can't tell you the number of times I tell people, it's like, there's no judgment here. We're just trying to ascertain.
Yeah.
And I get these litanies of 500 pages from day one, the child's 3. And I get 500 pages of messaging between the parents about how this one's better than that one. And I'm like, I'm not going through 100 text messages.
And it's a nonsense.
And at that point, it's very interesting because I was at a conference and a judge was presenting about, these affidavits and just the sheer volume. And like, is it relevant? You have to keep, is it relevant?
Yeah.
I mean, how many times do you have to show that you were the one changing the diaper?
Yeah. Nappy.
Yeah, I'm sorry, nappy. I'm in Australia.
And I'm pedantic.
Yeah. Hello, pedantic. But I mean, and I think that's really, I think that's a challenge as well, because, it really does turn into I'm a better parent versus what's the best.
Yeah. And so what we're trying to do
is...
is...
each party has attributes.
Yes.
That
they bring to the table.
Yeah.
And they're both important.
And they are.
And need respecting.
And that is a challenge. But again, once I get I'm not even supposed to know the children. I mean, I'm not supposed to see them. I'm not supposed to have any. Yeah, they're supposed to be kept out of the process. So for you,
it's important for our listeners to understand that that's for very young children. Yes, then we get that feedback. That is quite specific about who's the primary connection, how's the child coping, are there any concerns about their mental health.
So you get a report back.
No written report.
Okay, perfect.
Because it's mediation, so it's completely confidential still. No, the therapist who has done the interviewing of the child becomes the voice of the child in the mediation. So it's a beautifully structured process, so as the parents aren't being lectured or given a report that's officious, they get to have a conversation with the person that's having a conversation with their child.
There we go.
And we really want it to be a two-way conversation.
Well, it should be.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the parents.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing that we say. The therapist has met the child for an hour and a half. That's it. The parents are the experts with their children. We're just trying to give you some insights into what you might have missed. Or one of the nicer situations is when I see parents sitting there crying because everything's fine. The kids are doing really well. Because
they're adjusted, they've balanced it out.
It's important to note too that the interactions with the therapist and the child are age appropriate. For example, when you get a slightly older child, the one I love is the 3 wishes. So if you could have anything you want, sweetheart, what would it be?
What age is this?
From about 6, 7 up, even into teens, depending on the emotional maturity of the child.
There we go.
You just ask, what if you could have anything you want? And look, with older children, they will often talk about their I wish mum and dad would get back together. I want the latest widget, and can I have?
If I work mom and dad correctly, I'll get this from mom, that from dad.
I've had littler people want an ice cream bed.
Ooh.
Yes, very creative. If we get, I wish mum had stopped crying, I wish dad wasn't angry all the time, and I wish I could play with my friends more often, we know there's a problem.
Yeah.
If I get, I wish mummy and daddy were nicer to each other. I want a new bike for Christmas, and I would like to watch more TV at night. We know it's a healthy spread. Again, we're not looking for perfection. We're not looking to criticise or critique parents' parenting or parenting ability.
I think that's very important to get out there.
Yeah.
This isn't this whole entire process isn't about the parenting.
No.
It's about what status is the child, what can the parents learn from this?
Yep.
What can they do to help manage this process?
Yes. Yeah.
In a way that is beneficial.
Yeah. So we're the whole process is designed to just smooth the path for children. And then get them out the other end, healthy, happy human beings. I might have shared this stat with you that children of separated families have a 17% increased likelihood of developing mental illness as adults. The determining factor is conflict. If you remove conflict from the equation, then your children are generally on the same playing field as every other human being.
Right.
So it's just, if we can
But it's
remove,
that conflict, because it creates the anxiety, it creates the stress. Then they start creating the mechanisms at an early age on how to deal with that. Sometimes that's withdrawal. Sometimes that's acting out. How do you want to look at it?
The number one issue with kids is anxiety when they're
How
little.
crazy is that?
I know.
I'm like, at 7 years old, what kind of anxiety could you have? I'm not trying to dismiss it.
No, but
because my granddaughter had severe anxieties from the time she was about 4 to maybe even 10, 11.
Right.
By the time we saw her again when she was 14, it was a different set because it's, at that point you're a teenager. But I mean, I couldn't be out of her sight. I couldn't be, even dropping her off at a program at MSAC.
Right.
It took her, but luckily by the second day, she's like, "See ya. You don't need to stay here anymore. I don't need to see you. I don't have to have a line of sight."
Yeah.
But I can't imagine a world where that seems to be an increasing issue.
Separation anxiety is, I don't work professionally as a psychologist, but where separation anxiety in our field, that is where a child who is too young has been separated, generally speaking, and this is just an opinion.
Overall observation.
Yes, no,
based
thank
on
you.
your
Nicely
experience.
has been separated too long from somebody that they consider to be their primary connection, generally speaking. There may obviously be chemical issues or other,
we're talking about situations where that's not part of the equation.
Yeah.
It's just the normal everyday strife.
Yeah.
I guess, of being in this type of position where separation is not easy.
Yeah.
There are other factors that can make it more difficult.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And so the process of child inclusive, now it's called child inclusive process or child inclusive mediation. So if you're ever looking for this process, it's a CIP, child inclusive process, and it's actually child inclusive mediation. Obviously, as children get older, the process is slightly different again. And when you're dealing with teenagers and teenagers, then you do end up with it's a conversation, basically. They're semi-adults. But it's a really difficult point when they're starting to get to 11, 12, 13, 14. What information do you share with them? What do you ask? What opinion? What weight does their opinion have? And if their opinion seems skewed, and that's a point I need to touch on, is because if there is alienation happening, if there is coaching, we don't tend to use the word alienation. We use coaching.
Coaching, alignment. But
exactly.
the idea is that there's one parent getting some extra, nudges in,
and
so to speak.
That's often a real concern that one parent will coach the kids. Yeah. So when they're going through, especially older kids, when they're going through this process, so it's important for our listeners to understand that by using qualified therapists, they pick up on the nuance of the conversation with the child. Mm-hmm. So if a child starts using language that isn't age appropriate or phrasing that isn't age appropriate,
that's a giveaway.
A dead giveaway.
I mean, at any age, they say a phrase, and I'm like, Those words are a little too big for you, or
Yeah.
that concept's just a little older than you would, because you also, if you understand and again, age is one thing; it's the maturity level of the
Yes.
child that I think really should be the focus.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I've seen some, and again, working in healthcare, I've seen some very, very, what do you call, old souls at 9 years old going through treatments, and they're the ones talking to the doctor. They're the ones taking charge of their own health, and what's this do? What am I going to experience? And I'm like, you're 9 years old.
Yeah.
But, again, maturity level, I think, plays a greater part than age. So when people talk to me about, well, I thought, my 14-year-old gets to have her own say. I'm like,
I use the term resilient. How resilient, especially for littlies. For littlies, how resilient are they? And that is a key factor on exactly what sort of care arrangements we put in place. And that's the sort of information I'm after with the child inclusive process. It's important to know that for this process to go ahead, the therapist will talk to both parents before they talk to the child.
Okay.
And as the referring mediator, I will give them a brief. So I'll explain
to the
therapist. Yeah. So I'm giving them my breakdown of of my experience with the parents.
Okay.
How I view them, how I see, and and what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Can you give me?
And you get this from your intake process, and
Yeah.
maybe you've had one session already, or
well, you can
usually
do it with the one session already, and the government-funded providers tend to do it that way.
Okay.
But I don't, because we're private practice.
But you do the intake, so I
we
mean,
do
it's
the intake.
it's pretty involved intake. Let's be honest.
And
It's not like, hi, how you going? Here's my rates.
yeah. That's the 30 minutes with a lawyer, isn't it?
Yeah. I shall not say anything.
Okay, no.
No worries.
But also, I'm very conscious that it's a cost. And a time factor. So my client base, I can really only is Middle Melbourne basically. They're time poor. They want to get their matters dealt with as quickly and as effectively as possible. And
There's only so much time they can take off of work.
Exactly. And I schedule 4 hours for a parenting mediation.
Yeah.
So if I schedule 4 hours, they turn up and the first thing they start saying is, oh, well, she told me this. No, she told me this. And
he told me that.
Yeah, and it's just, they're just competing with each other as what the children have told them.
Yeah.
It's going nowhere. So it's call it quits and do the child inclusive. So why not do the child inclusive first?
From the get-go.
And then at the very least, you're going to get a snapshot of just how well your kids are tracking.
Right. You get the baseline.
The baseline to work
and
from.
you get to see where their needs are coming in.
Yeah.
And where you as a parent may need to contribute a little more differently.
Yeah.
Into what they're feeling or doing with the process. So you do the intake.
Yeah,
Child inclusion actually may work for you.
Yeah.
Here's what it is. Here's why it may work. Here's how we set this up.
And then
you get the report, and then the
therapist becomes the voice of the child in the actual mediation process.
But they include an interview with the parents as well. The therapist talks to the parents, or they talk to
the therapist will have a
so they're inclusive.
Yeah. Oh yes. Yeah. It's inclusive. The whole journey is inclusive, and it's important that everybody's perspectives are taken on board. We're listening to try and resolve conflicts for families, so we've got to understand where the conflicts are coming from and try and help and guide people to a better outcome.
But that helps you define the issues then for
Yes.
the mediation, for the parenting, and hopefully at that point, everybody's got some additional insight, maybe some additional options as to maybe something that could work better. So again, at that point, you're really you've got the issues defined. The parents have been an understanding of what's going on with the children. Then you can say, okay, here's how we start working from here.
Yeah, and let's put in place a care arrangement or a time spent with arrangement that reflects what we've heard from the kids, what you